Story 5. The Secret Plan. By EmyyWolf on DeviantArt. The following is a true story experienced by the author. All characters are still alive and kicking to this day. Posted on August 12, 2021. Recap. So the last time on Fat Tinkerbell Part 4, in the story of the Little Crush, we talked about how Fat Tinkerbell was now drooling over RoboCop. And RoboCop would follow her all around at work because that was his job. RoboCop also was staring at her in the office, but Fat Tinkerbell didn't know if that meant he liked her. Fat Tinkerbell wouldn't dare show behavior that exposed her true feelings. Fat Tinkerbell's reaction to these new feelings was to ignore, look down at her phone and act cold. He made her feel extremely nervous and shy. After the bullying Harry Potter and Weed Guy did to her in the other stories. RoboCop knew every area of the maze. It was his home, his territory. He knew every location in the maze like if it was the back of his hand. So he would take advantage of this and he'd pop out of nowhere to look at Fat Tinkerbell when she had seen him in a further location. It was almost like teleportation, like magic. Like if the RoboCop teleported and just to spy on Fat Tinkerbell. Which left Fat Tinkerbell in shock every single time he would do it. It also left her confused thinking, why the hell did he go out of his way to run over to Fat Tinkerbell to just stare at her? Or did he actually run? Did he use a secret passage? But let's begin this story. Story 5, The Plan. Fat Tinkerbell by that time was now hypnotized, entranced, and completely drawn to the RoboCop. She just didn't want to show it. The RoboCop turned her on, but he also intimidated her with his rough, soldier-like personality. She didn't know if he liked her, with how much he would follow her, watch her, and stalk her. Mainly because while in the office, he would only talk to Fat Tinkerbell like if she's just another employee who he didn't really appreciate. With his deep, serious, manly voice. Always just giving out orders to his subordinates. Fat Tinkerbell would begin to think that maybe the RoboCop has many girls, or a girlfriend. He must be popular with the ladies because of how attractive he is. This kind of threw Fat Tinkerbell off. It made her feel incompetent. Especially when the maze is full of gorgeous young females. In her mind, it was unlikely that he was single or not getting some action. He is an attractive hunk, with large forearms, wide shoulders, and large veiny hands in his mid-20s or late 20s. Like I've said before, he looks like he came right out of prison, while also looking like he came right out of the military, and looking like he came from the streets. He just looks like the true definition of a badass. He looks like he's been in fights. He looks like he F's 100 females a day. Fat Tinkerbell didn't really believe in the idea of there being alpha males in human society previous to obtaining this job, especially in today's advanced society. However, she was now seeing it herself. RoboCop never ever smiles. He has a frown-like facial expression no matter what or where he is. He looks people dead in the eye. His voice is deep as thunder, and all men follow his every command like dogs. He looked like he's had a lot of experience in the dating department, way too much experience. And of course, he looks older too. He looks like he's got some skills or real-life lessons thrown at him. You could see all the scars in his expression. And his hands, like if he's had to do a hell of difficult work in his life. He had that kind of confidence. He just looked like he's been through hell and survived to tell the tale. He looks like he's got a lot of testosterone all over him, more testosterone than the average man. Fat Tinkerbell thought, there's no way he isn't sleeping with some of them. Absolutely no way at all. She could sense his sensuality. No other average simpleton or lemming ever made her feel these insane feelings. I mean the average man. RoboCop looked like a boxer, with the face of Brad Pitt. The only difference is that his forearms were huge like Popeye the Sailor, and he was Latino. He was literally one of those Latino men who don't know any Spanish whatsoever because of their roots in the US and their upbringing. He had some young John Travolta and young Brad Pitt action going on in his face. And his behavior, unlike most men, was entirely militant. Honestly, this guy came off as insanely desirable to every woman. That's why Fat Tinkerbell loved to be followed and stalked by this man. She enjoyed and was turned on every single time he did it. She lived for that. Moving on. The days go by, and Fat Tinkerbell begins to wonder if the RoboCop is single, married, or has kids. If he's got a girlfriend. She just seriously wanted to find out, but without asking any of his friends, co-workers, or anyone at all. She had no idea how to do it. She just wanted some hope. She did feel that it was unlikely that the RoboCop would want her at all or ever because of her looks. She just wanted some sign or to get to know him somehow. She was getting tired of some random sexy stranger following and stalking her, even though she liked it. Fat Tinkerbell now wanted to know, who exactly is RoboCop? What is his background? What has he experienced? Why is he like that? Why is he besties with a cringe white skinny scrawny nerd like Harry Potter? She wanted to reciprocate some of the stalking and watching he has been doing to her throughout all this time. So Fat Tinkerbell begins befriending more and more of the maze workers and sellers just to get information out of them. Information about RoboCop more than anyone. She had to do it in a way that made her sound uninterested or not having a crush on RoboCop. So she would make it real casual, just talking about her job, her ridiculous uniform, then switching it to all the bosses in her job that walk around in there, like weed guys or Harry Potters. Maybe her co-workers wearing that Halloween costume, and finally reaching the subject of the one and only RoboCop. This meant that Fat Tinkerbell was also now willing to befriend other females, more attractive females and model-like females. Women who were tens. It appeared that most of them spoke other languages or were from other countries. They were just there for work, having a hard time making money or trying to suck the money from tourists. Fat Tinkerbell didn't know if RoboCop would have a thing for women like that, of different ethnicities, languages, and cultures to his. It seems as though he didn't. Again, because of his serious personality. He always behaved seriously or with anger. It appeared that he didn't do any flirting with anyone Fat Tinkerbell had met so far. Or so she thought. Also, as much as she would bring up RoboCop in conversations with the sellers, none of them behaved like if they've had anything with him. Any history, any sort of relationship. Those women knew about him and met him but did not really say anything that would hint at he's getting all their phone numbers, or that they all like him. If I'm making myself clear, it seemed as though RoboCop truly held up to his personality or his cop act. Basically that he didn't do anything inappropriate whatsoever. That he truly was this honorable, cop-like militant man. However, it was possible that he wouldn't flirt or behave as such while on uniform and at work in front of his subordinates and staff. In reality, maybe he actually was messing with some of those women, but none of them were about to tell Fat Tinkerbell this. Also, Fat Tinkerbell might have not been talking with the women he was dealing with at all. There are too much women in there. Well, despite Fat Tinkerbell's efforts, she still wanted to see if maybe hot hunk RoboCop would be interested in her with all the following he does to her. So she decided to put RoboCop on a little test. A little secret test. So she created a plan. Her plan was that she'd flirt and talk to a male seller for a long period of time, preferably a handsome or pretty boy for this plan. So that for the day she works with RoboCop, she was gonna see if RoboCop would catch her flirting with this pretty boy and have a reaction or not mind it at all. With all the following, stalking, and popping up that he did. It was the perfect plan. At least in Fat Tinkerbell's mind. This was a great way for Fat Tinkerbell to have fun at work and not be overwhelmed by work duties, and make light of the situation. Also to forget how she's ugly or fat, in a dead-end job or any of that. And so, Fat Tinkerbell begins her plan. She goes about the labyrinth looking for possible candidates for this plan. She looks and looks, she searches and searches as she walked about the maze. There was so much people around because the maze is retail. The sellers and staff are beautiful to sell shit to the shoppers and tourists. Most males, however, weren't exactly what she was looking for. A lot of them were too old. Many of them were way too skinny or way too fat. She took over an hour looking for a suitable pretty boy. Suddenly, she noticed the perfect pretty boy as one of the sellers within the maze. As she observed him, she realized that she had seen him before, maybe a month earlier. The story goes that one day, on another date, Fat Tinkerbell was walking around freaking out about how RoboCop was following her to look at her hideous face plus her hideous body while wearing that embarrassing costume with that top hat. That day, the intense heat of that tropical place was killing her. Just simply suffocating her. So Fat Tinkerbell decides to walk into a building with AC to catch her breath, escape the heat and the RoboCop at once. Which she isn't supposed to do. Therefore, she was breaking the rules by doing this. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she just needed a minute, a single minute of it. Well, as she stood inside this building which was full of humanity by the way, and all the shoppers were bumping into her. She felt relief and she felt hidden for that good 15 seconds. She knew she couldn't stay too long in there, since the owners of the buildings don't like Vermeer's soldiers to stand inside their shop. She waited in there almost 10 seconds and went back outside onto the hellish heat. She was sure that RoboCop would be about searching for her, but she didn't think he'd be there that moment to have watched her do all that. It was a 40% chance he had been around at that exact moment to have watched her do that. Had he been there, to have watched her go in there, he would have gone right after her. Fat Tinkerbell thought. As soon as she stepped outside of that shop, RoboCop himself was standing right there, maybe a meter or 4 feet away from her, facing her with his body and large arms. However, he wasn't looking at her. In that very moment, he was facing his shoulder, trying to look at something behind him or trying to speak into the walkie-talkie mic of which was on his shoulder. So he didn't notice her at exactly that moment, of which she decided to step out of that shop. Fat Tinkerbell was frozen. Her crush, her boss, was feet away and hasn't seen her. All he needed was to turn his face to look in front of him. He was 4 feet away. Fat Tinkerbell didn't know how to react, whether to step back inside and hide, risking RoboCop literally seeing this, or to run away. Either way, RoboCop was seconds away from facing her. Fat Tinkerbell's heart obviously started racing. She started freaking out, feeling like she got caught. Feeling embarrassed of her looks, like always. Before RoboCop turns to look at her and continue his walk, patrol, surveillance, Fat Tinkerbell turns the other way opposite to RoboCop and speed walks as fast as possible to not cause a problem or interrogation. She walks around another little outside shop to try and hide, and as she turns to look back at RoboCop to see if he's noticed her, a man that was selling in that tiny kiosk there caught her gaze and smiled. Which is now the same pretty boy that Fat Tinkerbell found for her plan. And yes, RoboCop did watch her as she walked all fast-paced, trying to hide within the crowd and the shops, with the most confused look upon his face. He watched her as she smiled back at this random seller man that was smiling back at her. And then he watched her as she was almost ran over by thousands of shoppers and humanity that walked in packs. It was one of the most hilarious events that have ever happened to Fat Tinkerbell. Ha 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 ha. But then she thought, how in the hell did she hide in this shop, making sure there was no RoboCop or coworkers in sight before she broke the rules like that? Only to stand in there for almost a few seconds and go back outside. And bam! RoboCop himself is standing right there, just a couple feet away. It's questionable, Fat Tinkerbell thought. Is RoboCop an alien? Does he teleport? There's no way! But yes. That had happened a while ago. It was hot, it was sexy, and it was scary. And Fat Tinkerbell lived for that. But back to this plan story that we're talking about. So Fat Tinkerbell thought, this pretty boy is the perfect tool to see if RoboCop is into Fat Tinkerbell at all. He had already greeted her with a big smile before, so there's a good stepping stone to begin with. Fat Tinkerbell was this shy, awkward fat girl, really fat. She was near 300 pounds. Although in order to begin this plan at all, she has to put aside all her shame and awkwardness and begin socializing with that random pretty boy. It was one of the most difficult things to do, especially for someone like her to speak with someone who's an 8, 9, or even 10 like pretty boy there. Well, in RoboCop's name. Fat Tinkerbell grabbed onto her balls and began her plan. She acted all confident and began talking to and befriending pretty boy, who was busy selling more often than not. It was one of the most awkward things Fat Tinkerbell had to ever do. Befriend some pretty boy with green eyes and blonde hair. Every single day Fat Tinkerbell would stop by to talk, joke and laugh with this random stranger pretty boy. She decided to do this on the days RoboCop wasn't there. Weeks passed, and the perfect day came by for the plan to take effect. RoboCop was out and about, following anyone he could, asking for everyone's location, being all extra. The pretty boy was there selling and being social. Fat Tinkerbell had noticed RoboCop pass a corner, so she knew he'd appear on the other side. So now Fat Tinkerbell begins talking and smiling and laughing with pretty boy, and pretty boy was down too, enjoying her attention, interacting with her. When suddenly, bam! RoboCop rolls by on his scooter across the hall wearing his shades, facing Fat Tinkerbell without looking elsewhere. Looking at her for the longest time without a care in the world as he rolled by. He wouldn't even look in front of him to not hit people. Fat Tinkerbell obviously noticed this and pretended she didn't notice him. Fat Tinkerbell then thought that it ended there, and that it was all RoboCop was gonna do. Just stare and that's it, end of story, bye-bye. Fat Tinkerbell wasn't expecting RoboCop any longer at that point, and she had only seen him that one time. So Fat Tinkerbell decided to stay talking to Pretty Boy for as long as she could. She didn't walk or continue her route. When suddenly... Ha ha ha. Pretty Boy, as he was talking to Fat Tinkerbell, looks up at Fat Tinkerbell and beyond her as if he's seen a ghost. And then his look turns back to Fat Tinkerbell and he points behind her. Fat Tinkerbell turns around and, guess who? RoboCop himself was now standing behind Fat Tinkerbell with his shades on top his scooter, with his large arms and large hands, broad shoulders and everything. Right behind Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell felt so embarrassed, ashamed and at fault. But her response to her boss showing up like that behind her was, "How can I help you?" RoboCop then, he kind of smiles and makes his deep serious voice that he usually has, not so serious, and says, "Hey, what's going on here?" Fat Tinkerbell replies with, "Nothing?" in question form, like if it's none of his business. RoboCop then says, "You can't be standing around, you should be patrolling," in an irritated manner. Fat Tinkerbell responds with, I know. Irritated as well, and she waves bye to Pretty Boy and walks off quickly. While both hot RoboCop and Pretty Boy stayed staring at her as she left. When it was time for the switch, as Fat Tinkerbell approached the office, she noticed all the co-workers were standing outside the office and not going in. When she gets near them, they tell her, "He wants to speak with you," while pointing at the closed office door with their thumb. They were referring to RoboCop inside the office in switch time. Some co-workers were laughing, saying that she's in trouble to her. Fat Tinkerbell felt absolutely scared of what RoboCop was gonna do to her. She knew what it was about. She was now worried that he was gonna fire her or write her up himself. Fat Tinkerbell then tells her co-workers, "Oh, I know," with a smug little smile. Fat Tinkerbell again had to grab onto her balls and step into that office with that hot hunk in there, all alone waiting for her. As soon as Fat Tinkerbell steps into the office, she sees RoboCop standing. He was occupying the king's desk this time. She decided not to get near him and stand by the door. She didn't want to show her attraction or fear or shame. She just didn't want to showcase her vulnerability whatsoever. So standing at a distance from RoboCop made her feel safe. RoboCop begins to lecture Fat Tinkerbell with a serious tone about how we co-workers need to make sure we are doing our job and not standing around talking to May's employees. He then says he had passed by her 3 to 4 times and that she stayed there talking to that guy. Then he continues with how she didn't notice him any of those times. He follows that up with, she should keep personal relationships out of work, because it looks like there is something going on. And as he got angrier making his points, he finished it with, "This is just a warning. And I don't want to see you do it again." Fat Tinkerbell agreed with a serious and worried look upon her face. She didn't talk at all except for the end where she agreed, saying, "Okay." Fat Tinkerbell at the end of that day felt defeated. She hadn't gotten a clear answer as to if RoboCop likes her or not, because he made it about the job and how she's breaking rules. She began analyzing what RoboCop talked about, especially where he mentions had passed by you 3 to 4 times, didn't notice him any of those times, and it looks like something is going on between her and the Pretty Boy. But those are just real things that went down, that RoboCop was pointing out to her. Doesn't mean he is confessing his attraction to her. And of course, with how Fat Tinkerbell was obsessed with RoboCop, with that muscle boy of a man, she would go on and on thinking, "Oh, maybe he wants me to notice him. So that means such and such. Or he was hinting at something by telling me that. And oh, he thinks something is going on between Pretty Boy and I, so he is jealous." Just mushy nonsense like that. But no matter what Fat Tinkerbell thought, in the end it really just showed that RoboCop only cared about the job and wasn't interested in Fat Tinkerbell at all. But then again, Fat Tinkerbell made a new plan to see if RoboCop might possibly be interested in her. Her plan now was to find out if he cared about other female co-workers in Fat Tinkerbell's level talking with male May's employees. If he caught them talking to employees and made an issue about it. And y'all have no idea what happens next. Tee-hee. Ha ha ha. Well guys, that was the real-life true story written by the author of The Plan. Share this story with whoever needs it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And please let me know in the comments below if you've ever experienced anything like this with your hot boss. If you've seen behavior like that from anyone in your life. If you've ever crushed on your boss or your own bully. Just leave your thoughts on this whole situation down below in the comments. You can find me on BitChute under the same username. You can also find me on DeviantArt under the same username. My second YouTube is EmyyWolf Productions. And you can find me on Facebook at Flat Level Earth, Flat World Discussion and Controversial Corner. All links in the description here and at my channel.